I'll take care of us. This is love, isn't it? Drew's voice was warm honey as he massaged my shoulders, his chin resting on the top of my head. On my laptop screen, the resignation email to my boss at Hamilton and Pierce sat ready to send, cursor blinking like a warning signal. I'd spent 8 years building my career as a paralegal there. 8 years of late nights, working weekends, and earning the respect of partners who rarely remembered assistants' names. But Drew had just made partner at his firm, and the numbers didn't lie. His new salary made mine look like pocket change. Are you sure about this? My finger hovered over the enter key. Drew spun my chair around, kneeling to meet my eyes. With his auburn hair falling across his forehead and that crooked smile that still made my stomach flip after 3 years together, he looked sincere. Trustworthy. Mia, you're always exhausted. Always stressed. Now you can focus on making our home perfect, maybe even take some classes, whatever you want. We'll have more time together. He squeezed my hands. Plus, we both know your boss is an ass. He wasn't wrong about that last part. I hit send. That was 13 months ago. Now I sat across from Drew at Brolo, the Italian place in Oakwood Heights where he'd first told me he loved me. The restaurant was half empty on a Tuesday night, but he'd insisted on meeting here. Maybe that should have been my first clue. I don't understand, I said, though the sinking feeling in my stomach suggested otherwise. You want a break? Drew's eyes darted around the room, landing everywhere but on me. He'd ordered an expensive Barolo, the wine, not just the restaurant, but hadn't touched his glass. Not a break, Mia. He finally looked at me, his expression a practiced blend of regret and resolution. I'm ending things. The pasta in front of me congealed as he spoke, words tumbling out in rehearsed phrases, grown apart and different directions and best for both of us. I sat perfectly still, years of working with divorce lawyers having taught me that the person who loses their cool first usually loses everything else too. Is there someone else? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His hesitation was all the answer I needed. Cassidy, he finally admitted. My new assistant. Of course it was. Cassidy with the Yale Law degree and the trust fund and the yoga instructor flexibility she'd demonstrated at the firm's Christmas party, bending backward until her hands touched the floor, a trick that had every male attorney applauding like she'd solved world hunger. How old is she? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. 24. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. But it's not about age. It never is until it absolutely is. What about the house? Our house, the 3-bedroom Craftsman in Laurelwood we bought together last year, though his name was the only one on the mortgage because my credit score will get us a better rate. Drew reached for his wine, finally taking a long swallow. I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay. Take whatever time you need, of course. And what am I supposed to live on? The question was genuine. I'd been out of the workforce for over a year. My savings had dwindled to almost nothing since I'd been covering groceries and utilities with my personal account while he handled the big expenses. Something flickered across his face, annoyance, not guilt. I'll help you get settled somewhere. A couple months' rent. But you're smart, Mia. You'll land on your feet. I nodded slowly, spearing a piece of ravioli I had no intention of eating. When what? When should I be out? He relaxed slightly, relieved I wasn't causing a scene. Cassidy's lease ends next week. I told her she could move in after that. 1 week. He was giving me 1 week to dismantle my life. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my untouched wine in his face. I just nodded again, like this was a reasonable request from a reasonable man, and asked for the check. Drew, suddenly magnanimous in victory, insisted on paying. Outside, the October air bit at my cheeks as Drew offered an awkward side hug goodbye. I really do care about you, Mia. I hope we can be friends someday. I stepped back, studying his face. The face I'd woken up to for 3 years. The face I'd trusted with my career, my home, my future. Sure, Drew. Friends. He smiled, relieved, then checked his watch. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. Or a young girlfriend waiting in his bed. Our bed. I watched him walk to his Audi, keys jangling in his hand. He didn't look back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at our kitchen table until dawn, a legal pad in front of me, making lists. I'd worked for divorce attorneys. I'd seen what happened to women who got blindsided, who acted from emotion instead of strategy. I wasn't going to be one of them. By morning, I had a plan. First, I called Marjorie, my old boss at Hamilton and Pierce. I'd helped her build enough cases against cheating husbands to know she had a soft spot for women in my situation. He did what? Her voice rose with each detail I shared. That absolute parasite. Come in tomorrow. 9 a.m. Not as my paralegal, as my client. Next, I drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of town and rented the smallest unit they had. Then I went home and began methodically packing anything that was unquestionably mine, plus all the documentation I could find. Bank statements, tax returns, property records. Drew was meticulous about some things, his cologne collection, his shoe rotation, but careless about others, like password protecting his laptop or filing important documents. What I found made my blood run cold. Drew wasn't just leaving me for a younger woman. He was leaving me with nothing because he had nothing. His firm wasn't doing nearly as well as he'd claimed. In fact, according to emails I shouldn't have been able to access, but did, because he still used my birthday as his password, they were under investigation for some creative accounting practices. Drew had been moving money around, skimming from client accounts, misreporting income. No wonder he wanted me out quickly. The house would probably be seized when everything came to light. He wasn't leaving me for love. He was using Cassidy as an escape route, planning to move in with her before the hammer came down. I photographed everything, forwarded key emails to myself, then carefully returned his laptop to exactly where I'd found it. Then I began the arduous process of finding somewhere to live with almost no money and no recent employment history. 3 days later, I was signing a 6-month lease on a studio apartment above a laundromat in Fairfield. It was all I could afford and all I could qualify for. The constant hum of washers and dryers below became the soundtrack to my new life. Drew texted occasionally, asking if I'd found a good place and reminding me I needed to be out by Saturday. Once, he even offered to help pack, which I declined. I didn't need his help dismantling the life he'd destroyed. On my last day in our home, I was careful. I took only what was indisputably mine, plus one thing that wasn't, a thumb drive containing every incriminating document I'd found. As I locked the door for the final time, I felt oddly calm. Not because I was at peace, but because I knew what came next. The following Monday, I had 3 appointments. First, with Marjorie, who listened to my story without interruption, then laid out a straightforward plan to ensure Drew couldn't leave me with nothing. He convinced you to quit your job, promising financial support, she said, tapping her pen against her legal pad. That's a form of financial abuse. Then he gave you 1 week's notice to vacate a home you've contributed to. We have grounds for support payments at minimum. Second, with my old colleague from Hamilton and Pierce who'd moved to the district attorney's office 2 years ago. She was especially interested in Drew's creative accounting. Financial crimes aren't sexy, she explained, but they're easier to prosecute. If what you're showing me is accurate, your ex has been committing wire fraud, tax evasion, and possibly embezzlement. My third appointment was with an IRS investigator. I'd made an anonymous tip through their fraud reporting system the previous day, and they'd called back with surprising speed. The investigator, a woman with steel gray hair and tired eyes, didn't smile when I slid the thumb drive across her desk. You understand that if your former partner is found guilty of tax fraud, any assets you shared might also be seized? She asked. I nodded. I understand. I have nothing left to lose. For the next few months, I lived in survival mode. I found work as a temporary legal assistant at a small firm in Fairfield. The pay was mediocre, but it covered rent and ramen. I slept on an air mattress and used milk crates as furniture. Every morning, I checked my email and phone obsessively, waiting for news. It came in pieces. From Marjorie. The judge granted the emergency support order. Drew has to pay you $2,400 a month until you're reestablished in the workforce. His lawyer fought it hard, but I had him cornered on the financial coercion angle. From my DA friend. Investigation is moving forward. They executed a search warrant on his firm yesterday. He's lawyered up big time. From the local news, prestigious Oakwood law firm under investigation for financial irregularities. Drew tried calling once during this period. I let it go to voicemail. Mia, what the hell? His voice was tight with panic. The IRS froze my accounts. They're saying something about an audit. Did you do this? Call me back. I didn't. The irony wasn't lost on me. Drew had convinced me to give up my financial independence in the name of love, only to discard me when something shinier caught his eye. Now, as his world crumbled around him, I was steadily rebuilding mine, brick by determined brick. I reinvested in myself during this time. I took certification courses in legal case management and digital forensics, skills that would make me more valuable in the job market. I joined a support group for women recovering from financial abuse, where I met Sarah, who'd endured a similar situation with her ex-husband and had emerged stronger for it. The hardest part, she told me over coffee one rainy Sunday, is remembering that you didn't deserve what happened to you. And that rebuilding isn't just about money. It's about trusting yourself again. She was right. Each small victory, paying my rent on time, buying groceries without checking my balance first, landing a permanent position at the firm, helped restore the confidence Drew had eroded. 6 months after our dinner at Burlow, I received a certified letter from the IRS thanking me for my cooperation in their investigation. The letter mentioned a whistleblower reward program I'd never heard of. Apparently, people who report substantial tax fraud can receive a percentage of the recovered funds. In my case, that amounted to $213,000. I read the letter 4 times before I believed it. That same week, Drew's face appeared on the local news. He'd been indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. The cameras caught him leaving the courthouse, Cassidy notably absent from his side. He looked thinner, his designer suit hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles under his eyes. When the reporter shoved a microphone in his face, asking for comment, he muttered something about persecution and misunderstandings before his lawyer hustled him into a waiting car. I watched the footage on my laptop in my tiny apartment, feeling nothing but a dull sense of justice being served. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about accountability. Drew had broken the law, hurt people, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. With the IRS reward, I put a down payment on a small townhouse in Millfield, a quiet suburb 20 minutes from my new job. I'd gone back to Hamilton and Pierce, but this time as their office manager, a promotion Marjorie insisted I'd earned years ago. You've got a better understanding of how this place runs than anyone, she'd said. And after what you've been through, I know you won't take shit from anyone, including me. She wasn't wrong. The day I moved into my new home, I splurged on real furniture, silk sheets, and an absurdly expensive bottle of Burlow. That night, I sat on my new couch, wine in hand, and finally allowed myself to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. I was standing on my own 2 feet again. No one could pull the rug out from under me because I owned the damn rug. Drew's trial made occasional headlines over the next year. He'd fired his first lawyer, then his second. His firm had collapsed under the weight of the scandal, with several partners turning state's evidence to save themselves. The house in Laurelwood was sold at auction to cover debts. Cassidy, according to courthouse gossip Marjorie shared with me, had moved to Boston with a venture capitalist she'd met at a bar association mixer. I followed it all from a distance, focusing on my own life rather than Drew's downfall. I made new friends, joined a book club, took up kayaking on weekends. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, just casual dinners with men who respected boundaries and didn't make promises they couldn't keep. One of them, a divorced high school English teacher named Ben, made me laugh harder than I had in years. We saw each other for a few months before deciding we worked better as friends. He still called occasionally with book recommendations or to invite me to community theater productions where he volunteered building sets. You've got good boundaries, he told me once. Most people who've been through what you have would either trust no one or trust everyone. You're selective. It's healthy. I took that as a compliment. Nearly 3 years passed. My career at Hamilton and Pierce flourished. I'd been promoted to operations director, overseeing a staff of 12 and helping Marjorie expand the firm's digital forensics capabilities. I'd paid off half my mortgage and started a modest investment portfolio. I'd even adopted a rescue dog, a stubborn beagle mix named Winston, who snored louder than any human I'd ever met. Then one rainy April evening, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a figure in a dark raincoat who'd pulled up against the downpour. When I cracked the door, chain still in place, the hood fell back to reveal Drew's face. He looked like a different person. The confident attorney was gone, replaced by someone gaunt and gray, with thinning hair and hollowed cheeks. Prison hadn't agreed with him, clearly.
Mia.
My name came out like a plea. Can I come in?
Just to talk.
I hesitated, then unlatched the chain. He wasn't a threat anymore, just a sad reminder of a chapter I'd closed. Inside, he stood awkwardly in my entryway, water dripping from his coat onto the hardwood floor I'd had installed last summer. Winston circled him skeptically, sniffing his shoes before retreating to his bed in the corner with a disgruntled huff. Nice place, Drew said, eyes roving over my carefully chosen furnishings, the framed art on the walls, the fresh flowers on the console table. You're doing well. What do you want, Drew? I kept my voice neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. He removed his coat, revealing a cheap button-down and worn jeans. I got out 2 weeks ago. Been staying with my brother in Parkdale. I waited. Drew had never been one for small talk when he had an agenda. I need help, Mia. He finally met my eyes. They took everything, the house, the car, my savings. My license to practice is suspended pending review, which is just a formality before they revoke it permanently. I've got nothing. That sounds difficult, I said, without offering solutions. He took a step toward me, desperation edging into his voice. I've been thinking about us, about how good we were together, before everything went wrong. Before you left me with nothing and moved your assistant into our home? The words came out cooler than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. He flinched. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. But you and I had something real, Mia. We could try again. Start over. I almost laughed. Here he was, showing up at my door after years, after everything, thinking we could start over. Now that he had nothing and I had rebuilt my life. No, I said simply. His expression hardened slightly. It was you, wasn't it? You turned me in to the IRS. I didn't deny it. You left me with nothing, Drew. No job, no home, no future. What did you expect? I expected you to move on like a normal person. His voice rose. Not destroy my entire life. Now I did laugh, the sound sharp in my quiet living room. I didn't destroy anything. I just made sure you faced the consequences of your own actions. So this was all revenge? For breaking up with you? I shook my head, suddenly tired of this conversation.
No, Drew.
This was justice. You broke the law. You hurt people, not just me, but your clients, your partners, even Cassidy. Where is she now, by the way? His gaze dropped to the floor.
She left.
When the indictments came down. Of course she had. A Cassidy with a Yale law degree wasn't going to hitch her wagon to a disgraced, penniless ex-attorney. I'm sorry to hear that. I said, not sorry at all. But I still don't understand why you're here. Drew ran a hand through his thinning hair. I need money, Mia. Just to get back on my feet. Alone. I know you got a whistleblower reward. Get out. The words were quiet but firm. He blinked, surprised. What? Get out of my house. I walked to the door and pulled it open. I don't owe you anything. Mia, please. His voice cracked. I have nowhere else to go. No one else to ask. I'm desperate. For a moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. How quickly the mighty could fall. 3 years ago, Drew was a respected attorney with a corner office and a bright future. Now he stood in my entryway, broken and begging, exactly as I had once been. The difference was I'd pulled myself back up. But this was love, wasn't it? I said softly, echoing his words from years ago. Isn't that what you told me? Something like understanding flickered across his face, quickly replaced by anger. You cold-hearted bitch. You planned this from the beginning. I shook my head.
No, Drew.
You planned this from the beginning. I just made sure it ended properly. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his wet coat and stalked past me into the rain. He didn't look back. Just like 3 years ago at Barolo, he walked away without a backward glance. Only this time, I was the one standing on solid ground. I closed the door and locked it, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet certainty that justice had been served. In my kitchen, I poured a glass of wine. Not Barolo this time, but a local Cabernet from a vineyard I'd discovered on a weekend trip with friends from work. I carried it to my back porch, where I could watch the rain fall on the small garden I'd planted last spring. Winston patted after me, settling at my feet with a contented sigh. I reached down to scratch behind his ears, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing against my ankles. My phone buzzed with a text from Marjorie. Still on for dinner tomorrow? Troy's making his famous paella. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring that Sancerre you liked. Drew might have taken a piece of my past, but he had no claim on my present or my future. Those belonged entirely to me now, bought and paid for, fair and square. As I sat there, watching the rain wash away the last traces of Drew's visit, I realized something important. I was genuinely happy. Not because of what had happened to him, but because of what I'd built for myself. A career I was proud of. A home that was truly mine. Relationships based on mutual respect rather than false promises. In the end, Drew had inadvertently given me a gift, the chance to discover my own strength. And that was worth more than any promise of love ever could be.